Yeah, you can see it like right there. I got the name. Anyway, this is a supererogation for it all costs money, and by David Haid and the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Anyone who doesn't know, it's a wonderful resource. It's the first collaboratively internet collaborative encyclopedia. It predates Wikipedia, and so, but it's only done by professional philosophers, so usually the quality is very high. Yeah. So I don't think I'll be able to get through all of it because these are usually very thorough. And if anyone doesn't know, if you are thinking about writing philosophy, this is where you start, the SEP. You start with whatever's here. You don't have to agree with what they say. You don't have to like reference all of the things that they reference, but you better start with the SEP because I can guarantee you everyone else is going to look at this when they're looking at your paper and they're going to reference like what gets said here versus like what you say. So if you're writing philosophy and there's an SEP article on this, you better fucking understand what it gets said in the SEP article because everyone else will. Even if they disagree with it, they're going to know what this says. So yeah. All right, so here we go. Supererogation. And this just got an update on March 4th, and it's March 20th today. Okay, supererogation is the technical term for a class of actions that go beyond the call of duty. Roughly speaking, supererogation acts are morally good, although not strictly required. Although common discourse in most cultures allows for such acts and often attaches special value to them, ethical theories have only rarely discussed this category of actions directly and systematically. A conspicuous exception is the Roman Catholic tradition, which gave rise to the concept of supererogation and the virulent attacks on it by Lutherans and Calvinists. Surprisingly, the history of supererogation in non-religious ethical theory is fairly recent, starting only in 1958 with J.O. Urmson's seminal article, Saints and Heroes. The Latin etymology of supererogation is paying out more than is due, supererogare, and the term first appears in the Latin version of the New Testament in the parable of the Good Samaritan. Although we often believe that Good Samaritanism is praiseworthy and non-obligatory at the same time, philosophical reflection raises the question of whether there can be any morally good actions that are not morally required, and even if there are such actions, how come they are optional or supererogatory? Thus, the substantial literature on supererogation since the 1960s demonstrates that even though the class of actions beyond duty is relatively small, and the philosophical attention paid to it is only recent, the status of supererogation in ethical theory is important in exposing deep problems about the nature of duty and its limits, the relationship between duty and value, the role of ideals and excuses in ethical judgment, the nature of moral reasons, and the connection between actions and virtue. Supererogation raises interesting problems both on the meta-ethical level of deontic logic and on the normative level of the justification of moral demands. So yeah. So anyone who doesn't know like the intuitive thing, they'll probably tell us. But basically it's like, look, you're supposed to be a good person in general. But sometimes you can like go over and beyond and be like super good, super nice, put extra effort in that would be over and above what anyone else was doing or would think anyone should need to do to just be a decent person. You're going to go the extra mile, be a great person, and that in one instance, and that would be being supererogatory. You're just going to go be like super great, go rescue some kids where you didn't have to. It's like running into a burning building, risking your life to save kids when like no one would expect you to die for like, some people you didn't know, but you go do it. In other words, don't be woke, no one will like you. I mean, you could definitely have like the supererogation on any side of like the spectrum, of course, because like supererogation would be like, what's it called? Go defend, what was that guy who went and like brought a gun to defend his friend's dad's business or something? That would be supererogatory. Go put yourself in the line of fire against that like raging woke mob, and have to end up shooting some crazy person because like to defend your friend's dad's business or something. So you can you can be supererogative on every side of the spectrum if you want. Okay, the two faces of morality, values and duties. Moral discourse is normative in nature, that is, concerned with guiding behavior rather than describing the world. But this normative character of moral judgment falls, broadly speaking, under two categories, axiological and the deontic. Okay, they'll tell us. The former refers to goodness, ideals, and virtues. The latter to what ought to be done, to duties and obligations, to justice and rights. Yeah, so one of them is like about being a good person, one's about doing what you need to do. So maybe you have to take care of your parents, not because you're a good person, but because you have a filial responsibility to take care of your family, like in maybe your culture. So that's not you being good, that's just what you are obligated to do. Yeah. So whereas the objects of axiological assessment is primarily states of affairs and human agents, the objects of deontic evaluation is human actions. For instance, the state of affairs of a world with no war is a moral ideal, and the individual Socrates is virtuous, whereas the practice of paying back debts is obligatory and acts of theft are prohibited. Yeah, so basically a moral world versus things you are obligated to do. So yeah. The axiological face of morality says the value of morality, unlike its deontic counterpart, is open-ended. Virtuous character traits, ethical ideals, or the goal of promoting human happiness have no fixed measure and can, in principle, be always improved and further perfected or realized. Yeah, you can always be a better person. Moral requirements are relatively fixed and well-defined, having clear criteria of fulfillment and violation. Consequently, the deontic sphere of morality is often taken as describing the minimal conditions of morality, the basic requirements of social morality that secure a just society, while the axiological sphere, that's the value sphere, aims at higher ideals which can only be commended and recommended, but not strictly required. In its deontic nature, morality is closely associated with the legal, while the axiological is closer to the ideal or the ideological, sometimes referred to as the ethical. Jesus couldn't be a better person. He was Jewish after all. Exactly, Vipers. Exactly. Furthermore, the way in which deontic norms are fixed and the universal expected of all members of society presupposes the general ability of all moral agents to act in light of these norms. Ideals of goodness and virtue in their open-ended nature cannot be similarly expected of everyone, and their determination is not subject to the strict condition of ought implies can. Yeah, so keep in mind, it's like you shouldn't drive drunk. Like, that's very dangerous. You could kill someone, you could kill yourself, do all sorts of harm. And so that's like a law. It's like an obligation. You don't drive drunk. Don't do it. Now, do you drive someone home that you don't know just because like they need a ride? That would be like you being a good person. Yeah. That too, it all costs money. But like, there's you can see the distinction here. You are not to drive drunk, but you could also, if you were sober, be a designated driver. It's like you didn't have to be a designated driver, but you are going to be a designated driver. And that sentence ends with ought implies can. I get stuck on that sentence every time. Okay, yeah. Just because you can drive people home doesn't mean you ought to drive them home. But like, yeah, it's not subject to the strict condition of ought implies can. Yeah, so again, just because you ought to be a good person doesn't mean you can be. Sometimes you're restricted from being a good person. But like the rules, like just because you ought not to drive drunk means you can drive drunk. I mean, yeah. So just because like you have the ability to not drive drunk means you can not drive drunk. You have that ability as a ability. You don't have to drive drunk. Just because you ought to be sober means you can be sober in that case. Yeah. Yeah, so sorry if I stumbled it a little bit, but you have to realize the idea that like there's something that you ought to be able to do implies that there's an option there that you could or could not do it. So the ought to drive sober means that there's an option between drunk driving and non-drunk driving, and you can be both. Okay. So again, this also presupposes the background of free will, just like so non-deterministic universe. You just have to keep that in your head. You're going to put them in the bank for next time. All look fun, but a streamer's choice. Okay, cool. Let me copy that for a minute. Then let me throw that here. Oh, Journal of Philosophy of Games. Yeah, sure. Throw that thing. I've got too many tabs in this browser because I just use it to save old papers. So, all right. Okay, most ethical theories maintain some form of this two-tier structure of the moral system, although admittedly in different versions and emphases. But this double role of normative discourse inevitably raises the idea of supererogation, the category of actions that are praiseworthy, either in creating good states of affairs or in reflecting a particularly virtuous trait of character, yet at the same time not obligatory. Yeah, so you don't have to be a designated driver for like people you don't know, but you could be a designated driver for people you don't know, but you're not obligated to do that. You are just obligated to not be a drunk driver. Supererogation lies at the intersection of the axiological and the deontic, the good and the ought. Since moral theories of the past, like Aristotle, Kant, and utilitarianism, all appeal in some form to both deontic and axiological concepts, the scant and cursory discussion of supererogation in those theories is all the more surprising. The most notable exception to this historical generalization is the long-standing and elaborate Roman Catholic doctrine of opera supererogationis. The general background of this doctrine is the recognition of the two faces of morality under the concept of precepts and counsels. The origins of this distinction go back to the New Testament, in which the question what one should do to gain eternal life, Jesus replies, quote, "If thou wilt enter into life, keep the commandments," but adds, quote, "If thou wilt be perfect, go sell what thou hast and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven." Yeah, so I guess minimally you won't go to hell if you obey the commandments, but if you want to guarantee to have riches in the afterlife, then you should go give away all your stuff to the poor and, you'll have treasure later on. All right, beyond charity, the Church Fathers detected in the New Testament two additional evangelical counsels, chastity and obedience. Taking a wife or husband is no sin, but virginity has a superior value. The life of an ordinary Christian cannot be blamed, but that of absolute monastic dedication is far better. Forgiveness and love of one's enemies are also religious ideals that originate in the New Testament and were sometimes given a supererogatory interpretation in later church doctrine. Osteen is promoting a better deal at the moment. I have no idea. That guy is like psychotic. I can't tell. It would appear that Christianity is inherently exclusionary. Yeah, it always has been. Always has been. I mean, to some extent. There was always heathens. There's always heathens. Not everyone can sell their shit? Yeah. Well, that's part of the thing. The idea is that you can just give everything away and somehow be alright is, you can. You might die, but you can do it. I don't know if that's what's expected of you, to martyr yourself just by doing this stuff, but yeah. You can't part with your RTX 3070. Yeah, I have a 3060 in my main computer. I'm thinking of getting a new video card for this one, because this is using a very something from 9 years ago at this point. It chugs. All right. The old law of the Old Testament is regarded by early Catholic thinkers as reflecting the rigid and minimal demands of religious morality, typically formulated in the negative terms of prohibitions and precepts, the violation of which entails punishment. 30 series peasants, yeah. You're running two mismatched. Ivan's running two mismatched GPUs in the system, so you can have 4 monitors at the same time. Yeah, I've got 2 monitors on this, and yeah, and I can't get up. It's very hard for me to get to 60 frames per second. So, yeah. You're just trying to get an RTX 4000 series through the eye of a needle. Exactly, yeah. All right, the new law, the law of the New Testament, sometimes called the law of liberty, leaves the individual free to pursue more edifying ideals of perfection. Yeah, the Old Testament's more just don't do stuff, then the New Testament gives you more ideals. Tertullian called this freedom licentia. According to the Catholic doctrine, the special merit of supererogatory acts accredited to their agent can be used both for that individual's own salvation and for the salvation of others. The superabundant merit, most typically collected by the actions of Jesus and the saints, who far exceeded what was required for their own salvation, is deposited in the spiritual treasury of the Church to be disposed by the Pope and the bishops for remitting the sins of others, the sins of other ordinary believers. This is how the institution of indulgences gradually developed in the late Middle Ages. Sinners could buy the remission of their sins, first by joining the Crusades and later by contributing money to the coffers of the Church. Yeah, so anyone who doesn't know, this is how universities and schools got started. They started because you could pay money to theologians and priests to pray away your sins, because you could buy this, because they could be supererogatory, do good things, and then build up some credit with God for you who's a sinner. And so these people would spend lots of money, and eventually it became, like prayer circles for like my sins, and then became like, schools where all the like professors and like stuff like that. And that's how universities got started, to pray away the bad. Yeah, I mean, what do you think a tithe is? It's like, yeah, support the church, like that's how these things got started. Pray away the bad. So, I mean, take notes, Ivan. You're trying to start a cult. Maybe this is a good idea. Like, if they contribute money to you, then you can spend that money making better rationality, and that will benefit society, because there'll be more rationality. Yeah, Ivan's got a cult. We'll talk to Ivan. Ivan Neo, right there in chat. He's running a cult. So if it's $20 a month, yeah, be a Martin Luther. So, I mean, maybe if they give Ivan more money, that will spread more rationality, and then society will be a better society, because rationality will be spread farther. Easy. You're penning your screed now. Okay, not a euphemism. All right, yeah, literally. Okay, the most articulate exposition of the doctrine of supererogation in the Christian tradition is found in Thomas Aquinas in Summa Theologica. Thomas mentions two distinct sources of merit of supererogatory behavior. On the one hand, supererogation serves as a more expedient or guaranteed way of achieving everlasting life. On the other, it is intrinsically good in being aimed at higher ends than the mere fulfillment of the commandments. Precepts are universal in their scope, whereas counsels are addressed to the few who have the capacity and inclination to pursue the life of perfection. For Thomas, the open texture character of the counsels of supererogation is what makes the morality of love superior to the authoritarian nature of strict law. But Thomas does not draw a clear borderline between duty and supererogation. It is, for example, not clear whether love thy enemy is a precept or a supererogatory counsel. You should call it Scientology just to piss off the Scientologists. The problem is, pissing off the Scientologists is dangerous, Vipers. Maybe, like, not what you should be doing. But yeah. It is similarly unclear whether the beneficence, almsgiving, is a duty or lies beyond duty. Nor is the role of virtue in demarcating the supererogatory from the obligatory explained. Thomas says that both natural law and positive law prescribe acts of virtue in general, but they do not prescribe every specific virtuous act, except for those that promote the social good of justice and peace. And as for divine law, it prescribes also other non-social actions that belong to the relations between man and God, but leaves those actions of perfect virtue to the realm of supererogatory counsel. For a more comprehensive survey of Catholic doctrine, see Densaurus 2023. Call it the GOP, great ontological philosophy. Yeah. See what I mean? It all costs money. I'm not out of the first section yet. Like, this is going to take a while. So, I'll get as far as I can, but, like, I don't know if you can see on this page. I'm only, like, a little bit in, and that also includes the header. Yeah, nah, people don't realize when they look at it, it's not a short article. These things are in depth. Yeah. Also, all the God stuff. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if there's things you want me to look at, I'll take a look at, but I'm just going to, let's see. All right, so only four more paragraphs here. Whatever. The Catholic doctrine of supererogation met with an extremely fierce opposition in the times of the Reformation. Luther, Calvin, and Anglican theologians attacked both the theory of supermeritorious actions and the corruption involved in the commercialization of the institutions of indulgences for which the theory served as a cover. Yeah, because, again, people were paying off the church, and, certain people will say, you're doing this to get wealthy. And it's not, like, that's not what Christianity is supposed to be about. Paying off religious people to pray away your sins. No human being, not even a saint, can do all that is strictly required as a duty, let alone hope to go beyond that. The way to salvation is not through works, but through divine grace alone. Even the most dramatic acts of martyrdom and self-sacrifice, which served Catholics as paradigm examples of supererogation, are strictly speaking obligatory. Protestant ethics thus undermines the distinction between the two faces of morality. On the one hand, normative requirements cannot be defined in terms of rules fixing minimally prescribed behavior. On the other hand, every religiously good behavior is obligatory. Saints and sinners are equally dependent on God's grace for their salvation. Paradoxically, it may be noted, exactly because human actions can never fulfill God's commandments, divine grace is never due or ethically called for. It is typically supererogatory, a free gift of God. Yeah, so since we're all sinners in the Christian faith, like we've got original sin, we all have to be rescued by God, even if you're a saint. Like you still have the original sin, I guess. Yeah. An interesting parallel to the Christian concept of supererogation can be found in Jewish thought in the notion of, I have no idea how, lifnim misharat hadin. Typically, the rabbis dispute its philosophical meaning since it could literally be literally understood as either within the line of law or it is more often understood beyond the line of law. Skip to section 2. Well, this is one more paragraph. So let's just get through this. Some philosophers like Nahmanides follow the former reading, arguing that moral acts of piety or charity are obligatory, that is to say, duties that apply to everybody. Others, notably Maimonides, adhere to the latter, more supererogatory understanding, holding that such acts are either obligatory only for the pious few or even not obligatory for anyone. This debate regarding the possibility of supererogatory acts reflects the deep underlying problem of the whole normative discourse in Jewish thought, namely, is there an independent system of moral norms and ideals which is not directly derived from the halakhic, commandment-based, legally binding and enforceable law. The hostile attitude of the Reformation to supererogation and the disappearance of the institution of indulgences in the Catholic Church led to the rapid decline in the theological and philosophical interest in the concept of supererogation in the modern era. But for a novel view of the Protestant recognition of some forms of supererogation, see Malema 2023. Other religious traditions can also be interpreted as leaving room for supererogation: Islam, Buddhism, Confucianism, mostly in terms of virtue ethics. However, the great theological debates about actions beyond the call of duty set the stage for the contemporary discussion of the subject. The revived interest in supererogation since the 60s has completely shifted the focus from the theological context to the ethical, but the structure of the argument is often reminiscent of the traditional Christian debate. Yeah, so this is one of these things you realize if you read enough philosophy. Mostly, like if we're having a modern debate, a lot of times it's just recycled old debates. And so the Christian theologians, they weren't fools. They weren't stupid. They were making good arguments back in the day. And so the arguments are just getting rehashed and recycled in modern contexts. And it's like not that surprising to people who know the history or have looked at a lot of arguments. And it's like that's how it goes. Just in some sense, you can say Kant with the deontological ethics is just redoing if they only knew about neural nets. Yeah. So they're reusing the abstractions exactly. So, I mean, it's just redoing the Christian theology in a non-religious contexts. Okay. What is supererogation? Problems of definition. The conceptual question of what we mean by supererogation and the substantive question of whether there are actually supererogatory acts and how the normative value can be justified are inextricably interrelated. You thought it remembered coming up among Kantians. Yes, because again, you have the laws in Kant, like things that should be universalizable, but then you could realize, well, not everyone has to be a moral saint or has to be great, but then it would be good if some people like did more, like, you know? So it's like, you can't be, everyone can't be expected to be like a moral saint, but you can be like, everyone's thinking, well, if everyone acted the way I'm acting, would that be good? Yes. But you can't expect everyone to be like giving up all their stuff all the time. It's crazy. Yeah, no one has any idea, Vipers, what defines a threshold. I think that's what we're going to get into here. No one has any idea about like what counts. The idea is that like sometimes you'd be like, wow, that person really went over and beyond whatever amount of beyond it is. Yeah. So consequently, although the following discussion will try to separate the two notions, addressing first the conceptual issue, and only later the normative, the division is only didactic. Much of the disagreement about the nature of supererogation and its proper definition is informed by the normative views about the scope of moral duty, the legitimate expectations of altruistic behavior, and the value of autonomy of the individual pursuing personal goals. The cult's patent holder decides. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, whoever your religious figure is, they can tell you. This interdependence of the meta-ethical and the normative levels of discourse on supererogation becomes particularly evident when paradigm examples are discussed. For instance, is forgiveness obligatory or supererogatory? Is both a conceptual and normative issue, and the same applies to charity, to acts of self-sacrifice, and even to toleration, as will be shown below. Okay, yeah, so this is a good example right here. Someone screwed you over, someone broke your heart, somebody did something bad. You don't have to forgive them because maybe it was really bad what they did. You just don't have to also be actively, angry with them. You don't forgive them, but you're just like out of sight, out of mind. You could forgive them though. And the idea is that like your forgiveness is not something that's owed to them, but like it would be a good thing for them to have. And so, maybe for whatever reason, that's why, like that's what you could consider over and above forgiving someone that you did not need to forgive. Okay. J.O. Urmson opened the contemporary discussion of supererogation, although hardly mentioning the term itself, by challenging the traditional threefold classification of moral action: the obligatory, the permitted or indifferent, and the prohibited. A more general scheme of this classification runs thus: 1. Actions that are good to do and bad not to do. 2. Actions that are neither good to do nor bad not to do. And 3. Actions that are bad to do and good not to do. Someone should send this link to Singer. Singer knows what this stuff is. He knows this stuff. Urmson argued that a morally significant class of actions, to which he referred to as saintly or heroic, such as throwing oneself on an exploding hand grenade in order to save the lives of others, does not fall under any of these categories. He referred to this class as praiseworthy, though non-obligatory acts, or in terms of the above general schema as 4, actions that are good to do, but not bad not to do. Yeah. Vipers. But yeah, it's like, yeah, so again, okay, so things that would be good to do, but not bad not to do. That's a nice way of saying it. The scope of this further category became, however, the focus of debate. Supererogatory acts in Urmson's sense, which is reminiscent of the Catholic doctrine, include only actions that are morally praiseworthy, valuable, although not obligatory in the sense that their omission is not blameworthy. But the general formulation 4, that's actions that are good to do but not bad not to do, could consist also of small acts of favor, politeness, consideration, and tact, which are good though not morally praiseworthy, which can be expected of people even though not strictly demanded. The latter, wider definition of supererogation covers a larger scope of actions that we tend to view as good though not obligatory, but the former, narrow definition of supererogation as having a unique moral merit better captures the essential value and hence justification of supererogation as a distinct category of moral action, to which Urmson referred as saintly and heroic. Yeah, so you go sacrifice your own life to save other people, even if you don't know that they're going to die. Yeah. The general scheme of 4, that is the combination of some positive assessment of the action with a non-negative assessment of its omission, can be filled in various ways. Good to do but not bad not to do appears to be too weak a definition for supererogation, at least in the sense that some omissions of supererogatory actions are or lead to bad states of affairs. So, quote, right to do but not wrong not to do responds to this concern but seems an equally weak definition for supererogatory action, this time due to the overly wide characterization of positive condition. For example, right falls short of the proper description of the act of volunteering to risk one's life in order to save a stranger. That sounds a little weird, but like, is it just right to like volunteer your life to save someone else? Maybe, but like, is that just the right thing to do, or praiseworthy or saint-worthy? Praiseworthy to do but not blameworthy not to do seems closer to what we wish to say about supererogatory acts. I don't have to, but it'd be a lot cooler if you did. Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, it'd be cool if you gave me that joint. Like, I could use some like weed. It'd be cool, but you don't have to. I'm just saying, it'd be really cool if you gave me some weed. Like, yeah, that stuff happens. Yeah, like share, would you? Noeli, what's up? Does philosophy force you to be religious? No. Philosophy generally does not. Philosophy generally is a very descriptive subject. It's telling you how the world is. It's not telling you how it should be. You need a normative thing. Now, philosophy in general consists of some normative claims, but like philosophy itself does not. So yeah. So now anyone who's giving you telling you the way you should be, they're probably trying to sell you something. Like, I'm not telling you how you should be. But if I told you you should do this, that's because they're trying to sell you something. You had a guy hammer you with the Kalam cosmological argument. Yeah, they're trying to sell you religion. They're trying to sell you something. That's simple as it is. Like, told you so. Yeah, welcome in also. So yeah. Okay, however, praiseworthiness is associated with the evaluation of the agent rather. If you have more questions on that, like, I mean, it's a complicated question. I mean, philosophy is very big. But if you have more, if you want to ask more about that, yeah. You are trying to emotionally manipulate yourself into $11 billion. Yeah, if you figure out how to do that, you let me know, because I would also like $11 billion. However, praiseworthiness is associated with the evaluation of the agent rather than the act, while supererogation refers primarily to the act. Furthermore, we often praise agents for doing their duty, for example, in overcoming obstacles like natural fear, and we often do not praise agents of supererogatory action, for instance, when no particular effort, cost, or risk is involved. There is no necessary connection between supererogation and praiseworthiness, as some philosophers argue. It seems, therefore, that the neat schema of deontic logic, comprising of pairs of normative concepts applied symmetrically to commission and omission, must be broken if we hope to arrive at a useful characterization of supererogation. All right, I know there's a lot of words, but basically, if you try to slice it up, it's very hard to just get like a simple way to be like, you should do this and it doesn't matter if you don't. So yeah, you deontology, exactly. This can be done by either mixing concepts from different pairs, such as good to do but not wrong not to do, or by enriching the schema itself by adding further conditions, such as the beneficent intentions of the agent and her altruistic motives. Yeah, so you have to... How to actually say the thing is like really over and above, hard to define, because a lot of times if you just shift around what counts as obligatory, then maybe that would be obligatory, but like there still seems like there's a higher level. Yeah, we're talking a little deontology here. Kant universal imperialism feels bad in your gut. Yeah, I'm not Kantian. Imperialism is not the word. Imperative, yeah. So... But the question of supererogation works well with deontology because you have a level of things that like you're just obligated to do, and then somehow there'd be more you could do, and that would be like extra praiseworthy. And so this echoes the old Catholic doctrine from where supererogation comes from, where you have like, minimum requirements to get into heaven, and then there's like higher requirements for like, sainthood or whatever. Okay. Definitions that are motivated by a skeptical attitude of supererogation often try to salvage the threefold classification of obligation, permission, prohibition as exhausting of the realm of moral actions. Yeah, super heaven. Well, I mean, that's they quoted earlier, I don't know if you were here, that, you can get into heaven, but then some people get into heaven and have riches in heaven. So it's like there's better heavens for like better people. So like the idea is that like, okay, you're not going to hell, but then there's people who are gonna be like in the palace in heaven. So yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you don't have to agree with the Catholics, Noli. Like, that's fine. All right. Yeah, some philosophers identify supererogation with the imperfect duty, or with the weak duty, or with duty that is personal and non-universalizable, or with duty that has no correlative right, or with an ethical rather than legal duty, or with an ought which is not enforceable. Yeah, I mean, all logical or reasoned arguments for God are gonna fail. Like, none of them are good. Like, that's in general, but that doesn't stop people from trying. Never has. Super heaven is stupid. Even the cheap seats are great. Yeah, I mean, but some people, they like it. Just the idea of material reward in heaven seems odd. Again, I'm not like trying to justify the religious doctrine here. I mean, everyone has a reward to go to heaven. I mean, you get like a platter of seven. You get like, was it the 72 virgins in like some versions of Islam? In like Christian, you get like whatever. You get like the like kingdom of heaven or something. And I mean, I remember once someone told me that like it said you get 72 virgin dates when you arrive in heaven, and they said that the word for dates was like the same in English as it is in the Arabic or whatever it was written in. So it could be a fruit. It could be a fruit basket. Like the dates could also mean fruit. But yeah, so it's like there's a lot of religion. Of course, they also use like a little stick and like sugar or whatever to get you to do stuff. But I mean that's not the point in religion, of course. Yeah. French silk pies? Yeah, I guess maybe not. Heaven is described in the Bible entirely by physical depictions, pearly gates, streets of gold. Yeah, sure. I mean, how else can we imagine the kingdom and glory of God? We have to use our own terms. In Judaism, you get to hang out and be dead until the Messiah shows up and there's a feast on Leviathan and Behemoth. Sounds rad. Yeah, Judaism doesn't have the same sort of afterlife. It's more, I think, in the old Greek sort of tradition of you're just hanging out. Like you're just in another place, but they don't say anything. I believe the afterlife is mentioned something like 5 or 7 times in the Jewish Bible, and every time it's in very much just in passing. Almost nothing is said in Judaism about the afterlife. It's just like a place. Like that's all it's said. It never gets talked about. I don't know what that is, Ivan. Shai Halud? Yeah. But yeah. I mean, maybe you know about the Islam more than me. Maybe that was it. I don't know. Yeah, it's just not there. I took a class called Death in the Afterlife when I was in college, and so we went over that. It's from Dune, close enough. There we go. Yeah, I don't know Dune either. Yeah, as long as the spice flows, that's all I know about that. My dad loved that shit, though. Oh my god. He would have loved the movies. Okay. Let's see how... Yeah. So like, yeah, we're gonna get through like 2 sections. We're not getting through even 3 sections, maybe. It all costs money. If you want me to go look at stuff, yeah. Let me know, because I'm gonna try to look at some stuff, but let's see what this is. I ride sandworms. You probably never seen one. They're pretty underground. Bad vipers. Bad vipers. You happy you made it this far? Yeah. So, I mean, I tell people, like, you can give me a SEP article, but, like, dude, you don't realize how, like, this ain't a small thing. Okay. So, where was I? The merit of super... Let me try and get through a little bit more here. Yeah. Doing one's duty does not win the agent any credit. She only did what she had to do, but going beyond the call of duty is meritorious exactly in the sense that the agent did something extra, breaking the balance of justice or that of respect for claim rights and fulfillment of duties. This merit of supererogatory action should be held distinct from the praise we often assign to the agent. Praise is a subjective assessment or recognition of the particular way in which the agent faced a moral challenge and acted as she did, for example, by overcoming special difficulties or obstacles, or sacrificing herself in the course of doing either what was her duty or what lay beyond it. Merit is an objective property of the act itself. It is typically attached to heroic and saintly acts, but it can also be gained by minor supererogatory acts of kindness or gifts, and is thus not necessarily associated with particular praise for the agent. Finish this section. I'll try. Recent works on supererogation refer to the moral merit conferring reasons for action, that is, reasons which are neither requiring nor justifying as a way to untie the knot or alleged paradox of supererogation. But unlike Catholic doctrine, few theorists of supererogation believe that this merit is transferable or can serve as compensation for others' people's moral failures. Well, of course, but I mean, if you're doing metaphysics in the Catholic Church, yeah, then maybe God can count up karma and even things out. I mean, if you're going to be like saintly, no one thinks that your saintly acts are going to make up for my shitty acts. Would be subbing gifts, bitstones, etc. to extremers be considered supererogatory? Yeah. Like, if you want to throw me like extra money and stuff, like, thank you, but it's completely not necessary and not expected. You are free to be here and stream. Like, I'm happy everyone comes. Like, that's all it is. But like, that's the idea. Like, all the non-shitty streamers out there, if they will always say this, I'm happy you're here. Do not be spending money you don't have. It's nice if you support streamers, especially the ones that this is their job, if you like their content. Because, like, you know, you might give, like, support some artists you like in the same way. But, like, of course, that's exactly the idea. Yep. Viper says, I'm quite disappointed to find that the definition of supererogatory is not something outstandingly evil, but merely something that is morally frowned upon, but still permissible. Supererogatory. Oh, okay. So, that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, evil would be, Yeah. So that's like the weak version. Like, that's like the ones where you're just being like extra polite in this. Like, it's good to be like polite sometimes, but it's like you're not really going over and above. So like the evil one, I guess, is the correlatory thing. Ivan, thank you. You're gonna go to No Gravana, suckers. Yeah, exactly. That's actually an interesting concept of Vipers. Like, there should be things that are frowned upon but not that bad, and then there's also evil. Yeah. He had a bad weekend for a sin sub. Yeah, exactly. It all costs money. Says, so don't take out a mortgage on my landlord's house to pay you money. Yes, don't do that. Hey, and yeah, of course my bot's not working. Doing the supererogatory, yo, thank you. Appreciate the 50 bits and the 100 Unreal Brian and the 100 bits from Ivan Neo. Yeah, so don't take out a mortgage on my landlord's house to pay me money. Noelle says, I'm still not 100% how he died in a way that saved sins versus anyone else who got crucified. Yeah, so in the Catholic Church, like, you can die for someone else's sin, and that will make up for it. I have no idea how they got this idea, but that works for them. That's it. I don't think there is more to it. Yeah, my voice is going. Yes, he rose after 3 days, so he gave us his weekend. Yeah, so that's what we've got. We got an extra weekend without the guy, and somehow that makes a big difference. That's well. Do I just got to think about it super hard while dying? Yes. If you are Christian, in that tradition, at least I don't know all the traditions. If you repent on your deathbed, you can go to heaven, as I understand it, in certain Christian traditions. That's all it takes. Repent on your deathbed, and you can go to heaven. I am not a theologian. I don't take my word for it, but like, I believe that is the case in some Christian traditions. And so if you believe in those Christian traditions, you can repent on your deathbed. Oh my God, and shit's crashing on me now. Okay, this is bad. Suberogatory acts accrue negative points that you can donate to others. Yeah, so you can like get negative karma. Exactly, negative karma. Can you target someone and purposely save their sins? Neat, thank you for answering. Yeah, dude, I'm not a theologian. I don't know if you can target, like, you can dump like bad karma on somebody else. I mean, maybe you can. Like, that's kind of cool. I was like, what's it called? You guys remember The Green Mile? That movie? Spielberg movie? Contact the patent holder. Jesus had an AOE, exactly. Like, in The Green Mile, there was a guy who could basically suck bad things out of people, and then he could, put it into somebody else. I was like, yeah. Okay. Yeah, so not too many people think you can actually use it as compensation for moral fails, like even out like the karma in the universe. Yeah. Spoilers, yeah. John Coffey, thank you. He gets into heaven. Okay, let's try and get through this last little bit. And although supererogation cannot be hoped to simply offset even one's own violations of duty, the merit of actions beyond the call of duty definitely plays an important role in the overall evaluation of one's moral record. Yeah, so if you're being extra good, you can, like, you try to make up for your bad stuff. Makes some sense. In cases of a high potential benefit, we may sometimes even be permitted to act supererogatorily rather than do our duty. Furthermore, the traditional idea of merit or superabundance associated with supererogation is reflected in secular ethical theories in the duty of gratitude. Acknowledging the meritorious nature of a gift or any non-obligatory well-doing is the morally obligatory response, irrespective of the moral praise, which might or might not accrue to the agent of the supererogatory act. Yeah, so if you like cultivate gratitude in your life, that goes over and above, like, well, you could thank someone, but then you've cultivated gratitude and you reflect that like later on, then that's like, more. So yeah. My grandma always said you have to thank the person immediately, you have to thank the person like, a little bit later, and then you have to thank the person a third time much later to show them that you were thinking about them. And that's what she said. I haven't thought about that in fucking decade. Maybe longer. Like, it's not a bad practice. She's not wrong about that. But like, yeah, you have to thank them when they give it to you. You thank them like right after, like soon after, be like, oh yeah, thanks for that thingy again. And then like much later, be like, oh yeah, thank you for that thing, a little while ago. Like, that's the idea. It's like that third thanking is like, showing you we're still thinking of them. It's like, that's over and above. All right. The characterization of supererogatory acts is highly controversial and cannot be captured by a strict formal definition. Furthermore, as has already come up in the discussion in this section, the way we describe supererogation is closely dependent on the way we justify or deny its moral value. Most typically, definitions of supererogation that introduce conditions of altruistic intention, free choice, and good consequences are constructed in a way that betrays an underlying view about special moral value and hence justification. On the other hand, definitions that are merely formal, deontic in nature, are not committed to the intrinsic value, indeed to the very existence of supererogatory actions. Yeah, so like anytime you make a formal system, you could just call that duty. And then it's like, well, why is one duty different from another, like an obligation? But like if you got a formal system, you could just define that as your obligations. And then it's like, well, why you ad hoc picking some to be fancy supererogatory actions as opposed to the other ones. Okay. All right, so yeah, so now we're getting into some of the details here. We're just qualifying it. All right, so I think we've got through actually, the main definitions and the issues here. All right, so yeah, demarcation, as Vipers I think brought up earlier. Just huge amounts, like you see, this is huge amounts of like discussion in these articles. Noli says, we really need you not to murder, but also it'd be really good if you fed the poor. Yeah, yeah. And what if, like, you just, like, fed the babies to the people who are hungry? Wouldn't it all work out then? Yeah, sounds nice. So, okay. Yeah, but we're getting up on 3 hours. Yeah, some sort of modest. That's a good name for it, But yeah, we're coming up on 3 hours. This is about the time I start losing my mind. I don't feel like I'm losing my mind, but that also, you can't tell when you're losing your mind. That's how that's how it's getting lost too.